Star Wars only, I don't know what the fuck your problem is.
We finally have our first live-action Star Wars show called The Mandalorian, and after what seems like years of speculation and waiting, we finally get to see what this show has to offer, and today we got to see the first chapter of this brand new series in the Star Wars universe. The first 20 minutes of this episode is really just establishing a few key aspects to the story of The Mandalorian. You learn more about the bounty hunting profession that our main character partakes in, and you also see the worlds that he visits, and the main character's name, at least at the moment, is simply The Mandalorian. Now, at the beginning, he's just out and he's doing what he does. He's a bounty hunter. He's capturing his bounty. And what's interesting is that you get to see the different worlds that he visits. And it's not like Rogue One, where Rogue One always gave you a title and a name for each planet. This one doesn't do that. You don't really know every planet that you visit. I mean, someone probably does. They probably put it in some book or something, but I don't know. It doesn't tell me what worlds they're visiting. They just go to a different world, and they're all extremely beautiful, and the scenery is really great. And what I love about the first half of the episodes is that the world that he visits feel like the universe and the Star Wars world that you have in the original trilogy films. There's not a lot of glossiness to it, it's not shiny, it's not nothing but CGI. The planets and location he visits, they feel real, they feel gritty and lived in. And I like that because it makes the world feel more immersive. Another interesting aspect I think fans will love is that there's a lot of different alien species that you see. You see species from the original trilogy films, and I believe some from the prequels and the sequel trilogy, correct me if I'm wrong, but you also have some new ones that I haven't seen before, and I think a lot of fans will be interested in that because a lot of people like exploring what each species can do and what they can't do and what planets they come from, so this may be enticing for a lot of fans who like to dive deep into lore like that. I'll avoid a lot of major spoilers in this video, but the first part of this episode is mainly about the Mandalorian simply catching one of his many bounties. And of course at the beginning there's a little bit of action that goes on, and when he captures his bounty he takes him, the bounty guy's always trying to talk himself out of it. It's just the classic, catching your bounty and taking him somewhere. He's a classic scumbag, I guess you can say. And I like that he's just simply doing his job. That's one of the great things about this episode is it's not some grand adventure. It's just him in a daily routine of a bounty hunter after the Empire has fallen. And he's also in a bounty hunting guild, which I think is a potential storyline that we could explore in the future, because you have Carl Weathers' character and he's kind of the main guy, and IG-11 is also part of this bounty hunting guild that you get to meet later in the episode, so you have potential with that right there of different members in the guild that you can possibly visit in the future of the series. Around this point though, around the halfway point, you start exploring more about the character of the Mandalorian and even his past a little bit, and like the name of course suggests, he is a Mandalorian and his name is The Mandalorian, and I think that's kind of funny and a little bit on the nose, but I'll take it. You get to explore his past a little bit in a certain sequence that I think is very interesting, and it adds depth to the character, and the editing in the sequence is also really good in my opinion, and you'll know exactly what it is when you see it. But it explores a different part of the Mandalorian. It also explores the culture of the Mandalorians, and I like that, and you'll see more about it when you get to that scene. But in this scene, you get to see his past while they're building on his future, and I kind of like the on-the-nose visual representation that you get with that. I thought it was very clever, and it added depth to the character, and it added character to our main character. Now, when the Mandalorian visits each different location or world, they truly are some beautiful scenery to look at, and they use a lot of establishing shots to show the unique sets and worlds that he visits to give you the proper feel to the places that he goes. And what's also nice is that there's a lot of iconic imagery, I would say, that you find in this episode, that certain shots that you look at and you're like, wow, it's not, I wouldn't say breathtaking, but you can really just pause it. It's almost like a picture-perfect moment where you can just freeze frame right there and just look at it for a few minutes and take it all in. But even though our main character, he is a badass, I mean, he is the Mandalorian, he's a bounty hunter, he's not perfect, which is also nice. It adds a little bit to the character. There's parts in the episode where he doesn't win. He needs proper guidance. And this is when I think the real Star Wars vibe kind of kicks in, where you get that Star Wars story where the character is still learning, and you see him learn in order to accomplish his task, because he can't accomplish his task without achieving a certain goal, without learning a certain new trick, and he needs that to complete his mission. And that adds a little bit to the character. It shows you that he's not perfect. He can't do everything and he wants to do simply because he can't. He has to learn on the way of doing his journey. And the introduction of IG-11 and his chemistry with IG-11 I think is pretty great, and I think it's also pretty funny, and fans will like that. And that's one of the great things about the show so far, at least, is that the humor isn't forced. It's not like Marvel humor that I say normally is a little forced, or even like the sequel trilogy. A lot of the humor in it just takes a lot of the tension out of the scenes and it doesn't feel necessary. There's a few chuckles in this episode and in the show, but it's not like the sequel trilogy where it's trying really hard to make you laugh. A lot of the laughs and chuckles that you have on this is very natural feeling. It feels a part of the characters that you're watching. And at the end of the episode, there are two pretty shocking turn of events that happens within a span of a few seconds. But this final scene in which these major spoilers happen are pretty shocking and show a lot about the character of the Mandalorian and what kind of person that he is. And, they always say, you gotta have a code of honor. He's gotta have some kind of moral code that he follows. And you see that in the show. And you see his kind of moral conscience come out. And I like that. It also makes you wonder what will happen next, because it really isn't a cliffhanger at the end of the episode, but it does leave you with some questions that you'll want answered, and I do like that as well, because there's some parts that they touch on at the beginning. There's a reason he's going to track down this certain bounty, and when he gets done with it, when he captures the bounty, the question is, alright, what's next? Why did the person who hired him want him to go get that bounty? What's the point of all this? And the first episode was directed by Dave Filoni and written by Jon Favreau, and I have to say I'm really impressed with their work. Dave Filoni specifically, he's never done any live-action filmmaking like this or on this level, but he's done a great work with the first episode, and that might be the team around him. He's got a lot of great directors around him and Jon Favreau, but it also just shows his dedication to Star Wars and his knowledge of the film industry. And you would think that he'd be directing many other films just based off of this one episode alone. I mean, it looks very professional. Of course, it has a big budget, but just the way he used the establishing shots, a lot of the cinematography in this, everything looked absolutely great. It was written by Jon Favreau, and I like that. I think Jon Favreau is great at this so far, and I'm happy with what he's done with The Mandalorian, and I'm excited to see what comes next. I know Dave Filoni's directing another episode in the first season, and I can't wait to see that as well. The show, honestly, has already got me hooked. It's done its job on establishing the kind of gritty and realistic feeling of the world that we're in with this story, and it also raises questions that keep me engaged for the rest of the series. First episode for me gets a 9 out of 10, and for anyone who's been following the channel for a while knows I don't really give out scores like that lightly. The show is the future of Star Wars. I think it's gonna bring a new wave of storytelling that we've been lacking in the Star Wars universe, and also make it into a show, kind of like the serialized commercials, or not commercials, but the shows that George Lucas used to watch back in the day with Flash Gordon. This kind of gives you that feeling. This gives you the proper new storytelling that I think Star Wars has been lacking. I have spoken.